In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to set up your Lumix S9. I'm going to be deep diving into all of the menu settings and how I personally like to set it up myself. Now, if you don't want to watch this entire video and you just want the perfect settings for the Lumix S9, you can go directly in the link in the description. But I do highly recommend still watching one portion of this video specifically, which is the custom buttons and how I personally like to lay them out and why I lay them out in a certain way. Now, you can reset this and I'll show you guys how to customize your buttons, but I do recommend going to that chapter in the description so you guys know how I personally customize all these buttons and how you can customize them yourself as well. So let's dive right into the menu settings. So the first thing we want to do is let's hop over to the M for manual video mode, and we're going to go right into the top settings. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my photo style is the one I prefer for my photos, which is going to be my natural with my teal and orange LUT, which you can download on the Lumix Lab app. I'm going to kind of be going over this pretty quickly, but my metering mode is the center, aspect ratio 3:2. I typically like shooting in picture quality raw plus fine, so if I want to edit the raw photo later on, I have the ability. For the picture size, I choose the largest possible. For my photos, I don't touch high resolution modes or settings. If you want to take any high resolution modes and settings, there's definitely videos out there online, but I don't really touch that. For my dual native ISO, I just leave that on auto, but I typically control my ISO whenever I'm taking my photos or videos, so I control that manually. From ISO sensitivity, I keep it at 100 and then auto. For my single scan for photo mode, I have it off, dynamic range off, vintage composition off, color shading, I don't touch that whatsoever. The diffraction compensation off, filter settings off. Focus mode, make sure this is set to autofocus continuous, so basically it will work continuously even if you are not taking photos or taking videos. You want to make sure this is on for both photo and video. Detection, I have it turned on, and then for my personal settings, I typically use human and then use the human body parts, but if you want to get more specific, you can go to face and eye, you can do your animal, car, motorcycle, you do all these different settings. I would play around and test them all out. For autofocus custom settings and sensitivity, I just leave this basically all to 0. Besides moving subjects, I have to +1. Focus limiter, I have it set to off, but if you want to set a focus limiter where it only focuses from here and here, on video is when you might want to use that a little bit more, less than on your audio. So for autofocus light, I set that to on. For focus peaking, I set it to off, but if I do turn it on and say I have a manual focus lens, I will like to have that either typically at +2 or -2 depending on how much peaking I want to see throughout the thing, and I like it being at a display color of red. Bracketing, I have off. Silent mode, I have also turned off unless I want that to be on for whatever reason. Now, hybrid zoom and crop zoom kind of work very similar with each other in terms of the menu settings, but for hybrid zoom is one of my favorite settings to use on the Lumix S9. Basically, it takes your 28 to 200 mm lens and it turns it to a 28 to 624 mm lens, and the photos actually look pretty good. For these settings, typically I will have this effect on wide, so it'll be at the widest possible thing. For the image, personally, I like having it at extra small, which is I believe a 3x-ish crop. Then you have your 2x crop at small, and then your medium, which is a 1.4x crop. I like being at the extra small. If I'm just using these photos for social media, I feel like they're pretty good enough, but you can definitely control and customize this if you want to. I like having it being extra small because you get more zoom. If you do it on if you want a higher quality photo but less of that hybrid zoom, I think it's doing some type of AR sharpening. So for example, right now I am on a 20 to 60 and my 28 to 60 turns into a 20 to 187, which is pretty impressive. The only main difference between this and then crop zoom, if I had it on, was this allows me to kind of digitally zoom in and out of the camera. So this kind of does the exact same thing, but this allows me to kind of do it manually and be able to control my digital zoom in and out. Personally, I don't like using the crop zoom. I feel it's just a little bit more gimmicky, but the hybrid zoom is definitely where the money's at, and it's a very, very, very fun feature to use. Image stabilizer, these are my settings. I just have it pretty much basically on basic. Burst shot settings, I will turn it on high when I want to do any burst photos. Shutter delays off, time lapse animation. I don't really touch time lapses too much, so I don't actually really play with this stuff that much. And then the self timer, I like send it to 10 with the 3 photos, so 10 seconds and the 3 photos. Now onto the video mode, so we'll move our dial and then go over to the video settings. So going into the settings, my exposure is set to manual, so I have full control of my aperture, my shutter, and my ISO. For photo styles, I typically like shooting in vlog and color grade in post. However, you can use your real-time LUT. You can use the custom photo styles and add 2 different LUTs on it if you like. Personally, again, I just like being in vlog to get the most control. The exact same metering mode, the dual native ISO set to auto. ISO sensitivity is at 640 because that is the dual native ISO at 640 and 4000 in vlog. And then for my synchro scan, this I actually have turned on. You will need to turn on your shutter angle and your shutter speed, which I'll show you just in a bit how to do that. But this basically allows my shutter angle right here only to move by 1 degree. Now moving down to the second tab, again, this is where you want to make sure that you are not in your shutter speed, but you are using your shutter angle. Again, this just allows you to only move by 1 degree. So if you accidentally bump the shutter for whatever reason, you're only going a degree off instead of a bunch of different degrees. So then synchro scan is why it's super important to have that on as well, so you don't accidentally do this and then you're at 200 or 270 degree of a shutter. You only go by a single degree. If you turn this synchro scan off and then you go back to your menu settings, it goes to 240 from 180. So it's just a much more drastic of a change. And synchro scan is really important if you're in any type of scenario and you're seeing some flickering lights. You can change it by a couple degrees or 1 degree, and those flickering lights will theoretically go away because of the frequency. All right, moving on to vintage compensation. I have set to on. Color shading, don't touch that. Don't need to touch this, don't touch that. For video record format, I set to MOV personally because again, I like color grading, but if you want to transfer these videos specifically over to your phone, I would then use the MP4 Lite, which allows you to transfer it to your phone. But I think you only can do that in 3.3K 30 frames a second or 3.3K OpenGate Lite, MP4 Lite. So for my record list, instead of going through all of these and showing you guys what my personal recording list, I'm just gonna show you my record list of the typical things I shoot. So if I wanna transfer it to a phone, I have my 3.8K, I said 3.3K earlier, but my 3.8K OpenGate MP4 Lite in 30 frames a second as my top one. 6K 24 and 6K 30 frames a second, 4K 48 and 4K 60. These are typically the only settings I'm using 9 out of 10 times, well, 100 out of 10 times. So these are the 5 settings that I'm using all the time with this camera. Typically, I'm either shooting in 4K 48 or 6K 24 frames a second because I'm editing on a 24p timeline. So for time code, I don't touch that with this camera because I really don't think you're going to be using time code if you're shooting on the Lumix S9. I might be wrong. For focus mode, if for whatever reason, I think it's this by default, change it to autofocus continuous. This is really important for video. So if you're not recording, your autofocus is still working. And if you're recording, your autofocus is obviously still working. But this just allows you to see your focus when you're not recording, how it's actually gonna work in real time. If you feel like your focus isn't working, it's probably because you're an autofocus singular. Turn it to AFC. Your life will be a lot easier. Autofocus detections are the exact same. The only difference right here is autofocus custom settings for video. I go to set and I like having my autofocus speed at +3 and my autofocus sensitivity at +1. These are personally how I like the settings. I feel like it's quick and snappy, but it's not too fast. It doesn't pulse the background. These are the personal settings that I find to be working the best for how I personally shoot. Focus limiter, this is really important for video mode. If you don't want your focus to be going from here all the way to here and you only want it from this little distance right here, that is when you would turn on focus limiter. You can set it, you can pick where your focus is by setting your points, and then you're ready to go. Autofocus continuous, I have this set to mode 2, so it just works all the time. Autofocus assist light, that's a little red light, leave that on. Focus peaking, I'll only set this when I am using it, and typically I'm only using it if I'm on a manual lens, so it's typically off. Any other time I have an autofocus lens. Focus frame moving speed, fast. Now for the sound settings, I leave my sound record display on. So this is right down here where it shows me my audio levels. I just like personally seeing that myself. Then going down, mute sound input, that's off. Sound record level standard. For the sound record level, I like keeping it at -12 to -15, especially since I have no headphone jack. I want to keep to that ground floor as close as possible and to prevent any peaking from the audio. So I like keeping that at -12. Sound record level limiter, definitely keep on so you don't accidentally peak. Wind noise canceller, turn off in my personal opinion, because you should just do this in post if you want to do that. If you're sending the clip over to your phone, you can test it out and use it, but you got to know whatever is inside the camera, however the presets and interface works with those audio settings, if you turn it on, you are going to be limited to that later on, versus if you keep it off, you have some wiggle room to kind of adjust that audio in post on the file. For the mic socket, I like having to do a plug and power, just because that's typically most of the mics require some type of power. Silent mode I have off unless I'm in a quiet scenario. I don't personally use the hybrid zoom or crop zoom on video mode, just because I don't really typically zoom, but if you do want to turn it on, you can only shoot in the 3.8K open gate light formats. For image stabilization, I will set this to just the standard. I don't touch boost IS a lot in this camera, but I do touch the electronic stabilization a decent amount. I have it set to this back dial right here, so I can hop over to standard or high whenever need be. I'll show you what all my custom buttons are a little bit in this video. All right, moving on. Self timer settings, I don't play with that. Focus transition, I don't touch that. Segmented file recording, I just leave that off. Live cropping off. All right, on to the next settings for the custom setups. We'll go up here to the top photo setting styles. I personally only like using a specific amount of photo setting styles. So I do go over here to show and hide. I have vivid off, I keep my natural on. I have all of this turned off all the way until I believe I go down to vlog. I have on real-time LUT, I have on again, and then these are my custom photo styles, which is the natural. I have a sunset LUT, a filmic LUT, and then these are off currently, but I'll probably turn them on when I have different types of photo styles and LUTs applied to those photo styles. So when I create them, I'll turn them on when need be. And then I go to my LUT library. This is just my custom LUTs that I have currently right now in the camera. I don't have that many. I typically only use my classic teal and orange for my viewing LUT for vlog, and then I'll use teal and orange for photos, and then I'll do the filmic photo one as well every now and then. For ISO increments, I definitely turn this to 1/3 intervals. This just basically allows your ISO to slowly bump up instead of having drastic changes. I extended ISO, I turned on. Exposure offset adjust, I don't touch any of this. Face priority in metering mode, I turn on. Auto white balance lock settings, I personally speaking, I haven't played with this setting. I typically will just set my white balance before I shoot anything. My exposure composition reset, don't touch that. Auto exposure in these different modes, I leave on. Creative video combine set. This part is really, really helpful to know what this does. Basically, if you go down to here, everything I like keeping the same between these two modes. So if you go to the camera mode, basically what it's doing, so for example, in photo style, it's set to the video icon. So my photo style on my video mode will be different than my photo style in my photo modes. But if I change this to the camera icon, then my photo style will be the exact same when I switch between video and photo. So this is really helpful if you want your white balance to not be the exact same switching between video and photos. You just go up here, you do this, you click on that, and then you're good to go. If you want them to be the exact same for your exposure or your white balance, you go in here and make sure it's the camera icon and not the video icon. Personally, I only use the photo styles because I like shooting in vlog for my videos, but then for my photos, I like shooting in the natural color profile, so I turned it onto the video mode just for the photo style alone. Focus shutter priority, I just have this to focus and balance. I don't touch basically almost any of this. My manual assist, I do change a couple settings. I have my focus ring set to off, autofocus mode is set to on. My manual focus assist display is the PIP, and my max magnification in full is 20x. Feet, personally, manual focus guide, I leave it at feet. Focus ring lock off, show and hide autofocus modes. If you don't want to see some of your autofocus modes, it is kind of cool. You can hide some of the focus modes that you don't use all the time. Personally, I probably should turn some of these off because I only use, I think, 2 of them 9 out of 10 times, or 1 of them 9 out of 10 times. So I should probably turn some of those off. Pinpoint autofocus settings, I just have that to the MID and PIP. Autofocus point scope settings off in PIP. Shutter autofocus is on. Human eye detection display is on. Half press shutter I have off. If you turn this on and you half press, it will start recording or press a photo right away instead of just doing your focus. Assign record to shutter button. So this just basically allows your shutter button to be also your record button, so you don't have to use the record button. The nice part about that is if you do that, you can set your record button to a custom function button. I personally have it because if I hand this camera to someone else, they know red means record, so I just keep that typically not assigned to a function button. Quick autofocus is off, looped frame, focus frame is off, and enlarged video display is on and PIP. Moving on. Q menu settings. I'm not gonna go too in depth over this, but I'll just go through all my different settings. So for photo mode, I have my photo style, white balance, ISO, my hybrid zoom because that's clutch, crop zoom, I kept it there, don't really touch it. My different photo shutter or drive modes, I have my peaking if I want to turn it on and off. My photo grid line, this is super helpful and handy. My silent mode if I want to turn off my audio or the shutter sound. I have another drive mode for some reason. I should get rid of the other one. Drive mode settings if I want to change how fast the camera takes photos, and then the aspect ratio. Some of these I don't touch and use, but it was just there by default and I didn't clear them. For my video, it's a little bit different. I have my silent mode for when I want to turn off the sound for recording, my personal record quality list, my sound record level display if I just want to give myself some more room on the camera to take that off, my photo styles, peaking, my frame markers, hybrid zoom, don't really touch this, boost image stabilization, so just image lock, basically it just locks the image. My monitor LUT, if I want to turn my LUT on and off for whatever reason on my monitor, I have that right there. And then these I haven't set up, these is just by the default, the bottom ones. And then my touch settings, I have it on, my touch tab off, and then my touch autofocus, it's all that. Operation lock setup, I don't lock anything on this camera because I feel like it would be too much of a hassle if I lock things on this camera, so I don't have to really touch any of that. Now my function display, I have not touched or messed with my function displays in play mode, but for the video mode I have. Now this part of the video is really important if you did purchase my menu system and you want to see how I set up my camera and function buttons. This is very, very important right here. So I can go in here and I can set up all my different buttons pretty easy. So my record button is my record button. My exposure button, I actually set it to my frame marker. This is super handy to just turn on and off frames. So you can go over here and you can just quickly turn it off and on. My autofocus or AF on, so instead of just finding my focus, because I can do that with a half press shutter, I turned that to just show me my different autofocus settings, and then from there I can go and I can change my subjects and different things like that. So I changed that instead of pulling my focus to be more useful to me. My LUT button, for some reason it's turned to this, but typically I have my LUT button set to my photo styles. So when I go through it, it will go through my different photo styles and I could quickly do it. The only reason I don't have this set to my real-time LUT and I have it set to my different photo styles is just because I find this just a little bit more useful. To change your entire LUTs is very, very difficult and have them being assigned to a specific color profile. So yes, this the real-time LUT button works and it's handy and useful if you want to just quickly switch, but you have to go through this entire process of assigning these LUTs to a specific color profile. So if you have LUTs that you upload from your computer and they're not assigned to a color profile, I personally like just making my custom photo styles into a specific LUT. And then I personally like going to my photo styles and just making my custom photo styles because I can apply 2 different LUTs. I can control it a little bit better. All right, moving down, my Q menu is just typically set to my Q menu. My back dial is set to my little balance beam. So if I press the little back arrow, it'll turn on this thing right here for my leveling. My ISO is set to ISO, white balance I left to white balance. And the only other two dials that I customize is the left dial, instead of showing my autofocus modes, now shows me my record quality list, so I can easily switch between different record qualities. And then my back dial again is the electronic stabilization if I want to turn it on and off. So I really only customize these two top buttons, this button up here for just my frame markers, then the back dial. The display buttons are the exact same. The ISO is the exact same, playback, the record button, everything else is the exact same. ISO display settings, yeah, that's basically it. The exposure compensation display settings, I haven't touched any of this. This dial set, I have it set to set 1, and this is by default. The auto review, this is for photos. I don't personally like using auto review. If you do want to turn it on for a few seconds, you can. Constant preview though, definitely have this on. It's not on by default, but if you want to see what your photo looks like on the back of your camera before you take the photo, you want to make sure this is on. Histogram I have off. Photo grid, it just depends if I want it on or off. Night mode, I don't touch that. Monitor display settings, I don't touch that. Oh, now this is starting to act up. Focal length on, blinking highlights off. All of this is off right here. My vlog assist, typically I have this set to classic teal and orange. This is just my personal LUT, and that's how I kind of like viewing everything. I don't use hybrid log camera, so I don't recommend you using hybrid log camera because you probably don't need to use that type of log unless you're shooting on TV and YouTube at the same time. Center frame marker, I like it being set to this one. I just like seeing my center of my frame at all times and knowing where that is. Safety zone marker, you can turn it off if you want. Personally, I just have it set to off because I don't want to see too many things on my thing. Frame marker, I'll turn this on and off depending on my settings. Again, I just have that quick button up here which can turn on my frame markers if wanted. My zebra patterns is off. My waveform vector scopes, I leave it off typically because I'm only using this camera for pure fun, not actual professional shooting. Color bars, don't even touch this. You don't need to touch this. If you want to touch it, you can do that and you'll have this thing pop up, which again, you don't need. So don't use it because you don't need it. For red record frame indicator, you should definitely turn this on. This creates basically a red box around your entire camera when you press record. So it just indicates that you are recording. Definitely should have that on. HDMI record output info display is turned on and the rest I leave alone. You probably aren't going to connect the monitor though to this camera. If you are, great. Lens focus resume off. Lens FN button setting, I have not played with this, but if you have a camera that has a function button on the lens, you can control that right here. Focus ring control, I set to non-linear. This is off. My lens info is set to on, so it can tell me that. Vertical position info on the video is set to on. Hey, just a quick interruption. I know this video is super long, so thank you so much for watching this entire menu setup on the S9. If you are interested in seeing more videos on the Lumix S9 and other Lumix cameras, you should definitely consider subscribing. Anyways, I'll let you get back into the normal video. Whew. All right, we're getting there. All right, for these settings, these are just all the custom settings. I don't really touch any of this. Monitor backlight, I will touch if need be. Yeah, you don't really need to touch any of this. You can go through it and see, you can change your beep sounds. This is how I have my beep sound set up. It is good to know that on this next page right here, which is gonna be this little thing right here, which is your custom menus, or custom menu pages. This is really good to put your most needed items on here, and then I would do it in the order of what you use the most to what you use the least, and the most common things you need all the time, I leave it at the top, and then the random things that you don't need all the time, you can leave it down here. I would write down everything that you would want on a consistent basis and then add it to this list. It does take a bit of time. So personally, I have on my custom page, my record quality, card format, just a quick Bluetooth. So if I want to connect to the Lumix Lab app, my monitor backlight display, which I use all the time to change my monitor backlight settings. My photo styles, if I want to change my photo styles, raw processing, I can't show it right now because I'm connected up to my computer, but this is such a clutch thing to do. So say if you have a monochrome photo like this, you can hit set, and as long as you took a raw and a JPEG photo, mostly the raw photo, you can go to begin processing. So you could change your white balance, your brightness, your photo style, which this is really cool. So say you're like, man, I wish I didn't take this photo style. You can go over here and be like, all right, let's throw this in a natural photo style, but it doesn't have any LUTs. So we can go down here, go to LUTs. We can select maybe a filmic LUT or maybe my teal and orange LUT. Let's do the filmic one. You could change the opacity. You're like, all right, that looks pretty sick. And you can go back up to your begin process. Your raw will turn into a new JPEG, save as a new photo. And now you have this photo, which was the original photo, which still has the raw, still has the JPEG, but now you have this new photo, which is another new JPEG, but this time it has a different LUT, a different color profile. It's really, really cool using the raw processing features on a consistent basis. So this is my personal menu settings. I hope this video was helpful teaching you guys how to set up your Lumix S9 for the best settings. Now, if you are interested in seeing my entire review on the Lumix S9, you can check out that video right here. And then YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Until the next one, guys, peace.